Hi everybody, and welcome to Q&A Wednesday, where I answer the questions that you have. Some of them are the most common questions that I get. Some of them come from clients, but today I really decided to talk about nutrition labels because I know that now that the food requires that there are labels and what is in the food, I think a lot of people actually have no idea how to read them. And I find that there's some information on there that's super, super important that most people are missing, right? So we're gonna talk a little bit about what's important on a nutrition label, what you should be looking for, and what those things mean. I'm not getting too much into the expected truth in advertising because unfortunately there's a lot of garbage that goes on with that, a lot of loopholes, a lot of legal mumbo jumbo, and so it's unfortunate that a lot of the foods that seem healthy actually aren't healthy. And I look back to when I first started to get a little more knowledgeable on nutrition and what I learned from it, and it's so long. Like there's a big road between then and now. I know so much more about nutrition and I look at things completely different. And so I understand how confusing it is when you look at the labels and what foods are and what you think is healthy and what really is healthy. Because of course, big food doesn't want you to know that what they're telling you is BS because they want to sell you more food. So let's talk a little bit about what's important on there. I did write some notes. We could talk for hours on how misrepresented most foods are, and we'll hit that a little bit, but what I really want to talk about is what you should be looking for when you are looking at nutrition labels. So first of all, I want you to question everything. You know, one of the most interesting things is when I hear people say, well, you know, it has to be organic, or it has to be grass-fed, or it has to be cage-free. Do you even know what those mean? What they sound like is great, but what do they really mean when it comes down to it? Because usually it's a little bit more of a gimmick than anything. Just because it says cage free does not mean that they roam free on pastures. It could just be that they're not in a cage, but they're still in a very small confined space. So it's okay to question that. You know, I think it's really important that we as consumers ask a lot of questions. We should, demand that I want to know what's in my food. I want to know what it's about, because even the things that I know to be a little bit healthier still have some gray areas. You know, when we talk about grass-fed beef, what does that really mean? And is some of it better than other options? It's true, really, actually. So you got to know what you're talking about. You got to be educated with it. But the one thing that I really want to talk about today is the most important part of the label. So, I find it really fascinating that some of the big food companies like Coke and Pepsi really, of course, they're trying to draw your attention away from what is super important, which is their food is processed garbage. So they really focus more on, all calories matter. What really matters more, calories or quality of what it is? And of course, I mean, you can eat 1,000 calories of garbage, yes, but your body's just not going to respond the same. So again, it really comes down to what's good for you and really what is truly healthy. And honestly, if you are buying something in a box that has a lot of ingredients, it's probably not super healthy for you. So let's talk about that. Now, I know most of us know at least the basics on how to read a nutrition label, right? There's a little square there. It is mandated by the FDA or the USDA, and they are talking about like what the macros are. Well, macros are important. It's unfortunate that it doesn't give you enough information. There's a lot of loopholes that the companies follow. Case in point, sugar. It can say 0 sugar on there, but they're usually, a lot of times they're going under a loophole, which just demands that if it has under 0.5 grams per serving, now that serving size might be a teaspoon. So if it has under 0.5 grams, they don't have to include it on the label. So what does that really mean? It means that you need to pay more attention to something other than just that little box that they put on there. Again, that's great if you know the calories. It's great if you know the sugars. But do you really know what it's made of? And that's a big part of it. You got to go down to the ingredient. I'm going to tell you that besides serving size, which again, that is important to an extent, but more than that, you need to know what the ingredients are. And that is, I look at the ingredients the first thing around, because there are some things that you never ever want to have in your food. And unfortunately, we are being taught that things like vegetable oil, all those commercials, they're like, vegetable oil is heart healthy. No, it's not. Polyunsaturated fats. There's a lot of misleading information out there. We're not being educated. And unfortunately, it goes back to, first of all, letting our government tell us what to do and what they think is important, because they're in cahoots with other people. But the problem is we're not being educated correctly. So what we think is healthy, I get a lot of questions about, okay, well, I hear that red meat is bad for me. No, it's not. Of course, it depends on how it was raised, but that's not the problem. The meat itself does not cause cancer. It's other things dealing with like how it's cooked and some other things. But it really comes down to the garbage that is in processed food. Again, any sort of vegetable oil and any sort of sugar, added sugars is, yeah, there's a lot more to it. Saturated fats are not the problem. Sugar is. So first of all, you got to educate yourself. You got to know what they're talking about. You have to know when that really does mean that it's a healthier version of something and whether it's just a lot of verbiage that really does mean nothing. So let's talk about the couple things that I pay attention to most when I look at a nutrition label or a food label in the first place. I immediately go to the ingredients. Now, you know that the first ingredient listed is the one that contains the biggest percentage of. So if sugar or oil or water is the number one ingredient, there's more of that than any other item in that ingredient list. And then it's listed in downward amounts. So the problem with that is that a lot of times companies get real smart and they divide the sugars up in the different products. So yeah, it might not be the first thing on the list, but if it contains dextrose and there's so many corn syrup, let's see, there's a bunch of them that are like corn syrup solids is my favorite. I'm like, what? So if they list it in a bunch of different forms, they don't have to include it on the sugars part. And it doesn't look like that it's like lower on the list of ingredients. So it looks like it's a healthier version when it's really not, because now they've got 5 or 6 different types of sugar in there. And weird places too. I mean, if you look at all your condiments, for the most part, ketchup has a ton of sugar. Mayonnaise has a ton of sugar. Like spaghetti sauce has sugar. Sometimes when people tell me, well, I don't have a sweet tooth, I'm like, go back to look at what you're actually eating and read the ingredient list, because you're probably getting a lot more sugar than you think. And even if you're not, those products are breaking down, because they're processed, they're breaking down into sugar immediately in your system, and of course raising blood sugar levels in a pretty big way. So you gotta know, it's unfortunate that we've been so ill-educated on how food really works, and so we're all scared and going the direction that we think is healthy when it's really not. It's the reason why we have such a huge obesity epidemic here in the United States. So a couple things that we really want to be careful of. Number one, vegetable oil. Again, because it oxidizes really quickly in our system, and it causes a lot more free radicals, and especially if we're not eating the healthy fruits and vegetables that provide antioxidants to help combat that, man, we're kind of adding insult to injury. And you have to pay attention to what all the forms are. It isn't just vegetable oil. It's hydrogenated. It's safflower, it's canola oil. All of those different products are not healthier versions, just the way that they've been designed. Not to get into science, but because they are polyunsaturated, which means they have more little gaps where they can get changed. Anyway, it just becomes a unstable product that we're eating, and it makes me angry that they have really touted that as being a healthy option. Now, there are some oils that are healthier options: coconut oil, olive oil, macadamia nut oil, avocado oil, especially if they are not as refined. The problem comes down to the more that it gets processed, the more that the healthy things get taken out of it, the nutrients, the vitamins, and the things that we need out of that. Okay, Monte says, do you think the excessive sugar is contributing to the rise in ADHD we see in children and now in, I'm assuming that says adults? Absolutely. The problem with sugar is that it completely it feeds the bad bacteria in our microbiome, and there is a lot of research now that shows that the problem and the reason why ADHD is coming up much more frequently is because of all of these products and these toxins that are killing or causing our microbiome to become completely unstable. It's such a newer science that we're just kind of hearing the beginnings of it, but it is an incredible amount of research showing things like just the fact that now we're talking about the gut, the microbiome, that's your immunity. They call your second brain for a reason. There's so much that goes on there. We have all these little bacteria, microorganisms that actually help our body reach a thermostat, a level playing field. And when the bad bacteria take over too much, such as when we get a yeast infection or gut dysbiosis, that causes some other issues. And I think a big problem is the lack of nutrients. I think most of America is malnutrition at this point. If you're eating the American diet, you are highly malnutritioned, and our body doesn't run on calories. It runs on vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And so, when they talk about empty calories, that's what they're talking about. We're not giving our bodies what it needs, or what our ancestors, thousands of years ago had and were able to live on. We have all of these new weird things like GMOs and trans fats that we've created, and that's completely destroying our microbiomes. And so we're coming down with illnesses and issues we haven't seen ever. They're modern, they're new, and it comes because we're eating such a horrible void of nutrients in our foods. I mean, take a look at things that didn't exist even 30, 50 years ago. Fibromyalgia. We're seeing type 2 diabetes in infants. That makes zero sense to me. I know why it's happening. It's because the parents are so unhealthy. They're passing down genes that are already predisposed to these issues. So the babies are born with the issues. Look at what the industrial world has done to us. It's really created some serious issues that we aren't addressing. And the medical world isn't addressing it either. They just want to give you a pill and send you on your way because that's what makes money. There's some really great books out there by some incredibly intelligent people that have done a lot of research. One that I just read that is super, super good. It's going to take some reading. It's like 400 and some pages. It was so good. I borrowed it from the library and then I bought it because it was that good. And I want to highlight. Called Deep Nutrition. It's by Dr. Kate Shanahan. Fascinating stuff. Now, if you're not into biology, you might have to skip around some information there, but really talks about how just the severity of the toxins in our foods today actually cause our DNA to morph into some really unhealthy forms. And then again, we pass that on to our children. So fascinating stuff. Other things that we need to be, okay, so back to the oil. So there's a lot of different things to look for. We talk about safflower, peanut oil, soybean oil. Those, like I said, cause inflammation, and that's what's causing heart disease. So you got to know what's going in there, plus all the additives and preservatives that make all those products shelf stable. Your body wasn't designed to deal with those. So you have a couple of situations. Either your body actually holds on to those, shoves them in our fat stores because, of course, that's our body's way of protecting us. But over time, at some point, we've put so much of that into our system, we start to see some really serious issues and illnesses and diseases, including cancer, come up from it. So again, you might have gotten away with it in your 20s, but once you hit 40 or you start to have all these issues, those weren't things that happened overnight. That is from filling your body full of all of these horrible products that are, they're just bad for you. You gotta use some common sense. I mean, because food companies are creating highly or hyper palatable foods, they taste good. You get addicted to them. Then we think that that's how many kids today don't even know how to cook an egg? Right? Monte says, can you post that book in the link? Absolutely. Actually, I'll post a picture of it too, because it's, wow. I've got a couple of really good books. I tend to read 4 or 5 books at a time, all nonfiction. I'm also taking another nutrition course because I'm starting college again. Going to become a registered dietitian. Pretty excited about that fact. Although I know they're going to teach me some stuff that isn't true, so that should be interesting. But yes, I will post that just so you have that. So things to look for in your foods. I mean, if you pay any attention, you're going to hear some things like, people are starting to talk more about purchasing nitrate-free, like I said, grass-fed. So keep in mind, the closer to nature that your products are, the better off you're going to be. If it is, beef that's been raised on a plant where they're filling them full of grain to fatten them up, that's a problem, because not only you are not only what you eat, but you are what you eat. Does that make any sense? Right? So if you're eating chickens, which by the way are omnivores, and all they're eating is grains, you're eating grain. So again, I don't think we think that far in the process. I think we've just kind of been led away from that a little bit, which is very, very frustrating. One of the things that bothers me the most is how healthy that they tout their products are when they're really not. Again, you got to kind of use some common sense. So my favorite is protein ice cream. It still contains sugar and it's still a processed food. Same thing with protein bars, still a highly processed food. So while probably a better idea than, sometimes not even a better idea than Snickers. You got to really know what you're eating. You got to pay attention to the ingredients on that. Your best options are healthy whole foods that technically don't have a label because they're not processed, so they don't need a label. It's just chicken. So keep that in mind. The other thing to pay attention to is, like I said, sugar. The biggest issue with that is that it comes in so many different forms, and you have to know what you're looking for. Anything ending in ose, O-S-E, is going to be a sugar, so lactose, maltose, fructose. But they come in other forms. And I find it fascinating that people are like, well, but isn't honey like natural? Well, okay, it depends. It can be a natural sugar. It depends on how refined it is. If you're getting raw honey straight from nature, or like everything else, it can be taken and processed, and same thing with oils. So you got to know what you're looking for and realize that your body doesn't know the difference between types of sugar. It just spikes your insulin and can cause some issues, especially if you are insulin resistant or are pre-diabetic. So the other thing that I get frustrated with is the deception in advertising. Again, you got to know what those things mean. Same thing, like, it has to make sense. Like, something might say that it's gluten-free, but I'm like, okay, but that's a product that shouldn't contain gluten in the first place. So, whoopee, you said it's gluten-free. That's because it's a gluten-free product. Like, eggs are gluten-free. Fascinating, right? And unfortunately, because we're not educated on those things, we think, oh, that's amazing, it's gluten-free. That's what it is. It doesn't contain gluten. Things like organic. My favorite so far is organic mac and cheese. Okay, that's totally misrepresented, because that all organic means is that synthetic pesticides are not used on the product. Okay, how is that even possible on mac and cheese? Because you're getting a highly processed pasta and nasty cheese. So again, you just have to pay attention. Sometimes I roll my eyes a lot. I get a little frustrated with the things that I see. And then when I hear people tout that they're eating so healthy, I'm like, okay, no, you're not. It's not healthy whatsoever. So things to be aware of. I'm not going to go into too much detail. What I'm really trying to get you to do is to pay attention to the ingredient list. But other things that might help you choose what you're looking for when it's not really a benefit are when packages say that they're all natural. That there's really no definition on that one. There's no legal definition, so companies can use that as much as they want to. Organic, like I said, a lot of products can't even be organic. That makes zero sense. Again, gluten-free, we just talked about that. It might already be a gluten-free thing, so whoopee. Fat-free. Okay, here's my favorite. Fat-free and light. Those came out when the government came out with the recommendations that we should be eating low-fat, right? And that a bulk of our food should be coming from whole grains, which no, I shouldn't. The problem being when it says fat-free or light, in no way, shape, or form does that mean it's healthy. And unfortunately, it usually means that it's got a lot of added sugar, because of course, if you don't have the mouthfeel of viscosity of fats, then they have to replace the taste in another way, which is usually by adding a whole lot of sugar. So again, you gotta know what you're looking for when you read those labels. Non-GMO. Okay, is it something that's non-GMO anyway? Just because it says that it has 0 of something actually means nothing. My favorite is the ones that say no trans fats, but if you really start digging into the ingredient list, you start to realize, again, they're following a loophole that just means if it has under a certain amount of whatever it is, they don't have to say that it has trans fat in it, so they just label it as 0, which I don't know about you, that makes me angry. So, it's unfortunate that that's the way that it is. And I think until we really make the government more aware that we're angry and that they need to change the policies, they're getting paid too well to do anything about it. So you have to do your due diligence at this point. Okay, so my tips for you. Number 1, pay more attention to ingredients than the other garbage that's on there, because that really is going to tell you what you need to know. Anything that sounds like a chemical is. So if it's, caramel color number whatever, probably not super healthy for you. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but I've heard things over the years, kind of some urban myths like, margarine is one molecule away from plastic. It is. There's something behind that, kind of like old wives' tales. People will say, well, chicken soup is good for the soul. Actually, it is. Bone broth is probably one of the healthiest, nutrient-dense things that you could possibly have if it's done right. So again, there's always some fact and some basis behind that. So pay attention to those kind of things. Number 2, educate yourself. Again, our government's not going to do it for us because they got other interests involved, and it's unfortunate that the people that elected them are not the most important people on their list. So you have to know what they're talking about. Again, what I used to think healthy was back, 15 years ago, and what I think is healthy now are so long ways from each other. Even when I'm allowing myself some extra, things that I don't normally eat, I really am careful not to. I can't do deep fried because my body just lets me know that's not okay. So again, really know what healthy really means. I giggle a lot because people tell me, oh yeah, I eat super healthy. And then I start looking through their tracking and their food diary, and I'm like, oh my God, no, it's not. Just like I used to think fruit snacks were healthy. Granola bars. I used to think granola bars were healthy. Well, they're granola. Oh, good Lord. They have more sugar than anything. So you got to know what you're talking about and that it really is healthy for your family. If you're unsure, and I know that there's a lot of, some documentaries and things like that, but they're all based in some sort of truth. So even the ones that take it a little far and make no sense, I've watched some interesting documentaries that really changed my mind. Like, I don't ever eat fast food at this point. Like, I just don't eat fast food at all. If I'm going to go out to a restaurant, it's got to be sit down. And even then I'm really, really careful because I know they're cooking things in oils and things that I really don't want. And pretty quickly my body lets me know because my body's not used to that. So use common sense, because the laws allow for labeling that's inconsistent with the product really is. You got to kind of know what you're doing. If it sounds like it's too good to be true, like, come on, protein popcorn, give me a break, it's still corn. Know what you're doing, know what you're eating, and pay attention to how your body feels. The longer that you start eating a cleaner, healthier diet, pretty quickly your body will tell you really quick when things aren't jiving, right? If you finish a meal and you don't feel good, there is a reason. And it doesn't necessarily, I'm not even talking about like overstuffing yourself like Thanksgiving. I'm talking about you go and have, onion rings and a burger at your local bar. You don't feel so good when you're done. There's a reason. Your body doesn't want that. It might taste good, but unfortunately you gotta balance, what do you want to feel like? Do you want to have energy and feel good and be present to the moment and have your brain on and not feel foggy and fatigued? That's what the vegetable oils and the what they call PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fats, that's how they make you feel. So the more that you pay attention and educate yourself, the better off you're going to be. I don't know about you. I'm going back to school. I need my brain to be 100% dead on at this point. I don't want to feel foggy and not be able to learn the things that I'm trying to learn. And then I think the biggest one is the fewer ingredients that those products contain, the better. When you have more than 5 ingredients, you are just eating a highly processed food. You just make some good choices. I tend to shop the outside of the grocery store. I'm in the proteins, I'm in the produce for fruits and vegetables. Even my peanut butter and almond butter, I grind because our local Wincos have the little section that you can grind your own. So I know exactly what's going into it. Things, even peanut butter, you got to pay attention. Some of that peanut butter has a whole lot of sugar in there. You start adding flavors, even to almond butter. Like there's a couple of them, like the Justin's, which sounds really good. You start paying attention to what they're adding to it, and that adds a whole lot of extra sugars and things like that. So, again, we're in a time period where there is a lot of information. Sometimes it's hard to sift through, but again, use some common sense. The fake news. I mean, you're going to hear some garbage, but use some education. Use some experience, and then use a lot of common sense to put those together when you make some of those choices, because not only is that going to benefit you, that's going to benefit your family as well. So hopefully that helps. You guys, I get my very best ideas from you. So if you have a question that you want answered, please ask away. You can either leave a message below or you can message me directly at Facebook Messenger. I do respond. Just don't be weird, because because I get a lot of that. But that's what we're here. We're trying to educate you into making, I want you to be healthy. I want you to be happy. And I really am your biggest fan. So have an incredible night, you guys. This Sunday, there will be Meals with Melissa. I got a good one. I'm excited. So we'll see you then. Have a great night. Bye now.